You are listening to Productivity Straight Talk with your host, Amber De La Garza. Amber is a sought-after productivity coach, trainer, speaker, and writer who gives entrepreneurs the straight talk on personal productivity. No BS, fluff, or overused jargon. Just actionable strategies to get results and succeed in business. And here is your host, Amber De La Garza, the Productivity Specialist.
Welcome, and thank you for listening to Productivity Straight Talk. Today is episode 94, Remote Teams. Would your business thrive or barely survive? With Wade Foster. If you are an entrepreneur who wants actionable solutions to maximize profits, reduce stress, and make time for what matters most, then you're in the right place, and I'm so glad you've joined me. I'm looking forward to bringing this episode to you to meet our guest, Wade Foster. Wade Foster is the CEO and co-founder of Zapier, a workflow automation tool used by over 3 million people to connect work apps they use every day. And I'm one of those 3 million users. When listening in on my conversation with Wade, you will discover the pros of having a virtual team, how to get on the same page in any time zone, what you need to double down on to thrive, how to know if your remote employees are being productive, 2 out-of-the-box ways to build culture and a strong bond among employees remotely, and so much more. So let's dive right in and meet our guest, Wade. Hey, I have something super special for you, and this is being brought to you by popular demand for sure. Are you sick of getting screwed by your overbooked and underutilized calendar? Of course you are. Are you overwhelmed by the mass amounts of disorganized emails in your inbox? Perhaps you have 70, 700, or even 70,000 emails in your inbox. I got you covered. I've got the perfect 2-part masterclass series for you. I'm going to be doing a 2-part masterclass series. Part 1, dominate your calendar. Part 2, conquer your email. I want to help you get your shit together. And well, we're going to do it in less than 3 hours. So if you want to find out more about this 2-part masterclass series, head on over to theproductivityspecialist.com/dominate. Again, that's theproductivityspecialist.com/dominate. I am telling you, this is a do not miss masterclass. I have taught this so many times to audiences and companies and entrepreneurs alike, and the results are amazing. And I want you to get those same results in your business by dominating your calendar and conquering your email. Join us over at theproductivityspecialist.com/dominate. And by the way, the classes start next week, so do not hesitate. If you're listening to this the week the episode is going live, you need to head on over to claim your spot. Hello, Wade. Welcome to Productivity Straight Talk.
Yeah. Hi, Amber. I'm glad to be here.
Oh my goodness. I actually got an email from your team about being a guest, and I was like, no way. I use that program. That would be awesome to have him as a guest. So I'm really excited to bring you to my listeners and talk about what you've created in, I believe, a relatively short amount of time. I think it's very impressive. We're going to talk about what Zapier is for those of you that don't quite know how amazing that program is, and then how he's created a culture and productivity within his company all remotely.
Awesome.
How'd that sound, Wade?
I'm excited.
Okay, excellent. So can you start off and share with our listeners in your own words about yourself and what is Zapier and what does life look like for you right now as the CEO?
Yeah. So Zapier, our mission as a company is to help everybody be more productive at work at its core. The product helps you do that because we connect to all the different tools that you use at work. So if you use G Suite, Slack, Trello, MailChimp, QuickBooks, or any of these 1,400 different apps we connect to, we allow you to kind of set up these little workflows or rules that automate kind of little bits of your day so that you don't have to think about that stuff. You can have something that just does it for you. And so that's kind of the heart of who we are.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to share a little bit of experience of my and how I use Zapier to give this some context. But before we do, can you let us in on when were you in business? Because this is a good story. When did you start business? What did business look like then? And what does business look like now? Like, who do you have supporting you and what's that structure?
We started in late 2011 and it was just Brian, Mike, and I. So three of us, and it was a side project at the time. Brian and I had been doing some freelancing and we got asked to build a one-off PayPal QuickBooks integration. We built a WordPress forms plugin that could hook into Salesforce. And Brian kind of had this idea. He's like, we could actually make it really easy for end users to set these integrations up on their own if there was kind of a hub and spoke model to do this. And at my day job, I was messing around with the Marketo at the API at the time and not really succeeding very much. And so I was like, oh, wow, this could really be helpful. And so the three of us, nights and weekends, just started working to build out the initial prototype, get the beta out, get some early customers. And it took us 9 months before we launched it. And it took us probably 2 years before we even got close to replacing our day job salaries again. It took quite a while. But nowadays, Zapier is 200 people. We have 3 million users using the product, 1,400 apps on the platform. So it's that little tiny thing that we started on in 2011 is now like a pretty meaningful thing for a lot of people.
Oh my goodness. It is. And for me, it's always like, it's magic. And I've had a great experience because you think, oh, there's this third party that's making these two important programs talk to each other, right? Mm-hmm. It's always working. And for me, I pay a monthly subscription and I've talked about it in past episodes. And to what I say is when you decide that you're going to create automation in your workflows, it's actually creating efficiencies where I'm not paying someone to duplicate data entry or duplicate, and then there's errors in that way. So I use Zapier for efficiency, and I feel like it's like a little mini employee out there working for me, making all my programs talk together, and then also provide a great user experience for my clients because they don't need to do things multiple times, and it just works really, really well.
That's so cool to hear.
Yeah. Okay. So what I brought you on here for, so everyone should be checking out Zapier. I'm going to give the 2-second commercial. If you have this program you love and you have program A and you have program B and you're like, oh my gosh, it would be amazing if that information could be in program B without me being in the middle of it. Zapier helps you send information and let them kind of talk to each other. That's probably not the technical definition how Wade would describe it, but essentially it allows programs to work together that didn't once talk to each other. Is that right?
You nailed it. That's great.
Good. All right, awesome. So if that's your challenge or you're finding that to be a challenge, Zapier is your solution. All right. So what I wanted to talk to you about is, so this was a side project, nights and weekends, 3 guys, right? Mm-hmm. All right. So did you guys know your roles right up front? Did your expertise bubble up immediately, or was that something that had to be figured out as you're like, oh, this actually might work? It's a business.
Yeah, I think it was pretty obvious our strengths and weaknesses as we started. Like I'd worked with Brian before and Brian had worked with Mike some before. So one of the reasons why the businesses work so well is that the 3 of us are really just great partners. Mm-hmm. Our skill sets complement each other really well, but we also have overlapping skills in important areas. So where Brian is deeply technical and Mike is a really smart product person, and then I understand go-to-market really well, but each of us is capable of helping each other in their job. Brian and I are both decently good product folks, so we can help Mike out. And Mike and I are okay programmers, so we can get in and write some code in the early days. And Brian's also like pretty good at go-to-market. So like each of us could do each other's jobs enough that we were good partners, but we had deep expertise in the areas that mattered. And it kind of covered all the important pieces of what we were trying to do. And that was pretty obvious out the gate. So we didn't have a lot of, I guess, conflict around, oh, I want to do that. No, that's my thing.
Yeah.
It was just pretty obvious. Hey, you go tackle this, I'll go tackle this, and then we'll meet in the middle.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. Now, do you remember who your first hire was? Like what role was your first hire?
Yeah. So we hired our first person about a year after we'd started. And by that point in time, I was waking up at 8 a.m. and I would do customer support from 8 a.m. till about 3 p.m. And I was like, okay, like I love customer support. I love spending time with our customers. It's fabulous. But I also need to spend time fixing some of the things that they are writing in about. So our first person we hired was in customer support.
Okay. All right. Excellent. So we're going to leapfrog from end of 2011. Well, actually, you made your first hire somewhere at the end of 2012 to today. And so how many people do you have?
We're at 200 people today.
200 people. And here's what I had found out. You don't have an office building. Like everybody's remote.
Correct. No office. There never has been an office in all of Zapier's history.
There's never been an office. Okay, so now this leads me to the question of how do you know your employees are being productive in their own environments? How do you know that they're doing the work? Like, what are your checks and balances? Stuff like that.
Well, I think one of the great things about modern tools, like things like Slack and Trello and Gmail, and even like the more specific things like GitHub or Help Scout or Jira, is you can see the work. So for an engineer, if we don't see commits going into GitHub, what's happening? Like what's going on? So you can see the work. If you're in support, your emails aren't going out in Help Scout. What's going on? So there's the tools kind of create this transparency around what work is happening that makes it very easy to understand what's getting worked on and what's not getting worked on. So you don't have to be so worried about, are people actually doing their job? Because you can just see, are they doing their job or not? And if it doesn't look like it, you ask a question. Hey, what's going on?
Yeah.
Do you need help?
All right. So it seems like you're really liberal in that it's results oriented. As long as they're getting the results, are they free to work? I guess it would depend on positions, but are there positions where they're free to work any time of day they want? Like they can make their own hours?
Yeah, it definitely depends on the position and the role and who you're collaborating with. At this point in time, the biggest reason why you kind of have to work some hours at certain times is because you have to collaborate with teammates. We're big enough now that there's these cross-functional works that has to go on. And so as long as you kind of make an effort to like meet with your teammates and collaborate, that's a couple hours a day, maybe. Outside of that, it's, did you get the work done? And if the work got done, then great. If the outcomes are happening, wonderful. If not, then it's like, hey, what's going on? We got to figure this out.
Right. I love that because I talk a lot about us having to find our own best way of being productive, right? So some people are morning people, some people are night people. Some people are probably working their job in a coffee shop for you. Mm-hmm. They're like, that's my jam. And others are in a square white box room. Everyone has their different way in which they find their best time. And we can do that as entrepreneurs. You and I and everyone listening, we're business owners generally, other than when we have to deal with specific clients, same things, collaboration. We can work. Like if we're night owls, we can stay up through the night. So I love this idea that you guys went against the grain and we were like, what would that look like if employees had that freedom and that type of stuff?
Yeah.
Have you had one thing that came up for me when I was just doing a little bit of research about you is when you have 3 partners, were there any challenges up front with productivity, or was there this level of accountability because there's 3 of you, right? Could you imagine if you started this by yourself versus 3 of you?
Yeah, I don't see how there would have been any way for us to, if any one of us isn't there, I don't know that Zapier is what it is today, or if it even exists at all. Like all 3 of us were so bought in and we poured so much time and energy and our heart and soul into making it what it could be that there was never a question of like, oh, one of us isn't holding up the end of the bargain or anything like that. All of us were in it and it just made it easy. It was like, hey, we all want the same thing. Let's go make it happen.
Yeah. The reason I asked that question is because a lot of listeners are solo business owners, right? So we have this way of negotiating with ourselves or saying we're going to do the thing and okay, maybe tomorrow. But it seemed like you had this built-in accountability. Okay, today, this is what's getting done and we're meeting. And that was contributing to your exponential growth, that everybody was accountable to each other.
Exactly.
All right. Awesome. Okay. So with regards to your remote team, can you let us in on why you guys decided to go all remote?
It was kind of playing the cards that were dealt us, to be honest. It wasn't like we had this epic pros and cons list or anything like that. What had kind of happened was 2 things. One was Brian, Mike, and I, we started in Columbia, Missouri. It was a nights and weekends thing. We moved to the Bay Area for Y Combinator, which is an incubator that funds early stage startups. And for the summer, the 3 of us lived together. But at the tail end of that, Mike was moving back to Missouri to be with his then girlfriend, now wife, as she was wrapping up law school. he's super important to the company. We're not going to kick him out over geography. Like that was insane.
Right.
So that was the first thing that was like, okay, we're going to do some remote stuff. And then the second thing was when it came back to hiring our first employee, we'd never hired before Zapier. So this is the first time I'd ever tried to hire anyone for any type of role. And I went around and asked for some advice. How do you think about hiring? How do you go about hiring an employee? And some advice I got was like, well, one way to de-risk this is to go hire folks that you've already worked with before, people that you have a professional relationship with, because you know you can work with them then. There's a little less risk involved. However, none of the people we knew were in the Bay Area. So the folks we all knew were back in the Midwest. And, we ended up hiring Micah, who was in Chicago. We hired someone else in Missouri. And so that just kind of set us down this path of doing it remotely. And at some point in time, pretty early on, we realized, hey, this is working great for us. Like we're not having any sort of problems around it. Let's lean in. Let's kind of make this remote thing part of our identity and who we are. And when we did that, that really helped kind of set us apart from a lot of different companies because we were taking a bit of a unique approach.
Yeah. So is there any advice that you can give business owners that either they're like, I'm going to make my first virtual hire, or I already have a hire and I just can't seem to get it to work? Is there any advice or missteps that you saw that you were like, man, I wish somebody would have told me?
I think the thing that I didn't have at the beginning that I had to learn, some of the lessons I learned the hard way, some I just picked up as we went, is how to be a manager. And if you learn kind of basic management skills, you find that you won't have these types of problems. So if you understand how do you give feedback appropriately, how do you set expectations, how do you delegate appropriately, and if you do those things well, you tend to not have problems, or if you do have problems, you're equipped with how to handle them. You don't freeze up and be like, oh my gosh, this person's not doing their job. What do I do?
Right.
You think, okay, I need to give feedback. Okay, how do I give feedback? And you just kind of learn these very basic things that managers do that for me, when I started, was a totally foreign concept. I had no clue about what that actually entailed. But as soon as I started learning, it was just a light bulb went off and it was like, oh, I get it. Like if I say, hey, these are the expectations, this is what I expect. If they don't live up to it, I can ask why. And we can have a conversation about it. And it didn't have to be this really, the management sort of manager direct relationship didn't have to be this adversarial thing. It just had to be a conversation.
That's right. So that sounds like it's advice as being a business owner with employees. And I was waiting for you to drop something like, and they're virtual and it's more difficult, but it's not. You're saying it's, and I get it, probably your whole experience is virtual, but it's the people. We're all people, right?
Exactly. I don't think the remote piece of it, whether they're remote or whether in an office, from a management perspective, it doesn't change. You still need to understand what their goals are. You need them to understand what your goals are. And you need to set the expectations of this is what we're trying to achieve here. And this is how we're going to go achieve it. And then you communicate. And when it feels like you're going to miss the expectations, you communicate about why that's going to happen. And as long as you kind of stay on the same page about that stuff, it doesn't matter if you're in totally different time zones or not, you figure it out.
Yeah.
The problem is when you don't talk about that stuff, and then you find yourself in a really awkward place where no one knows what's going on about anything.
Yeah. So my team is all remote as well. And one of the things that I have found to be helpful was having regular meetings via Zoom, like face-to-face.
Yep.
And that has allowed me to have working meetings, accountability, a check-in. I'm really verbal. So I like giving my tasks to my team verbally via Zoom. And then I meet with them once a week and then we meet again and get an update and move forward. That has worked well for me. And the reasons I've loved it is because it actually started by accident. My assistant did live here in Las Vegas with me. And then she went and got married and had kids and moved across the country. And so I wanted to keep her because she was a valuable asset to my company. And so it just kind of challenged us, well, how can we do the same thing, but remotely?
Totally.
And then once that worked, it was like, well, who else can I have? And why would I only want to look in Las Vegas for the best person for that position or for that help or that role? And so now, like I said, everyone's remote, but I think it has allowed me to have a wider option of who I bring on my team. And it fits my business because of the business level. I think that when people are remote, it also opens up for small business owners that not everyone's looking for full-time work. You know, if you were making them come into the office and travel and do the thing, then now it's a specific group that probably wants full time. So there's been a lot of wins with being virtual as well. And I guess if I was interviewing myself, I couldn't tell you there's been many challenges going virtual either. It just seems like a really cool thing, but
yeah, I think it's one of those things that because it's different and because it's not what folks are used to, it can seem scary. Yeah. But as soon as you get into it, you start to see like the pros, and certainly there are cons that you have to work through as well. But you understand why it works. And it's like, wow, this is not so different after all. And there's actually real tangible benefits. It's just kind of making that first leap to say, hey, we're going to give it a try that like is scary for folks.
That's right. So do you guys have annual meetings or retreats or something where the team gets together and they see face to face, or how do you create that culture?
We do. So twice a year, we do a big team get together. In fact, just last week, we had the whole crew out in New Orleans for the week. And we're staunchest advocates of remote work and distributed work as anybody. But even still, that face-to-face in-person time is super critical. Yeah. Something just is able to, there's some human element that clicks when you have a meal together or when you walk down a street together. It's hard to say what it is. Mm-hmm. And you don't need a lot of that. Like that's not something you need to do every day, all the time. But if you get just enough of it, it kind of builds a connection and a bond that's stronger than a virtual only relationship.
Yeah. So how do you promote that in the relationships virtually? Is there like a Slack channel, or is there communication that is just like, I don't know, what you would have normally found in the lunchroom?
Yeah, we do a handful of things to promote those types of conversations. One, in Slack, we have a bot called Donut that randomly pairs people up to jump on a Zoom chat every week. And so they'll jump on a Zoom chat for 30 minutes. It's informal. There's no structure to it at all. So you can talk about whatever you want. This week, I talked a lot about book recommendations. We were talking about the things we were reading and what we were learning from them. And that was what we discussed. We didn't really talk about work much at all. Sometimes we talk about work a lot because there's a very specific thing that's like, hey, I actually am curious to learn about how this is working for you. But there's no rules about it. It's like talk about whatever you want. So that's one way. The second way is we have a whole set of channels that are off-topic channels. They're not work-related, and they're all prefixed with fun. So this is a cue that, hey, this isn't a work channel. This is just a random off-topic channel. And there are things like DIY crafting, gardening, parenting, sports, movies, like whatever it is that you kind of are interested in, it exists. And so it allows people to kind of build connections with other folks in the organization that share similar interests. And I find what these rituals do, what these kind of structural things do, is it builds these really human bonds between people before there's like a critical work thing that has to happen. Someone phrased it to me like this: you want to get to know your neighbors before your house is on fire. And so this is us helping people get to know their neighbors, because at some point in time, we're going to have a real hard problem at work. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be something that maybe we don't agree on the solution, or it's just really going to be tough. And we need to be able to like know that when we're dealing with those things, at the end of the day, I'm dealing with another human that I like and I respect, and I want to continue working with them. And so if I have to tell you something difficult, or you have to tell me something difficult, it's not personal. It's just, hey, we're trying to sort out a really hard problem here.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I was not expecting that. A craft Slack channel. That's really good that you guys are thinking outside the box to keep the communication and really build community. And I could think of some companies that I worked for previous to owning my own, and we got looked sideways if we stayed in the lunchroom too long. And if we were talking about crafts, that would be weird. So you can have a brick and mortar business and there's still no culture. So I love that you're doing it virtual and building that culture and getting to know your neighbors. I would love to know personally, so I'm guessing my listeners would too, what is a day in the life of a CEO of Zapier today? Because I can imagine what it was, grinding it out and the hours and the work to get where you were, to get to where you're at. But now that you have a team of 200, what are your most productive activities and what's your days look like?
It has changed a lot over the years, and it continues to change. Every 6 months or so, it kind of feels like a part of my job changes. But at its core, there's really two, maybe three things that are super important for me to do. One is I have to make sure that folks understand the vision and the mission for what we're trying to do. If I can articulate that clearly, then everyone in the company is going to understand that and going to be able to perform their role appropriately because they know how they fit into that. The second piece is making sure that we have the right people in the right roles. And so a big part of my job is recruiting. Like from a time spent perspective, I spend probably more time recruiting than I do any other task, because when we're able to bring someone in who can help us solve these difficult problems, who is going to push and challenge us and expand our thinking, that's like the highest value thing that I can personally do. There's very few things in this company where I am the best person for that job anymore. And in fact, maybe zero things am I the best person to do the thing anymore, which that's totally different than in the early days when there's just three of us. You kind of look around the room and go like, none of us are good at this. Well, it looks like I'm going to be the one that's going to figure this out.
Right.
So it's a totally different perspective. It's like when you're three people, you do everything. And then as you get bigger, it's how can you slowly delegate everything that you do to the point at which you kind of don't have a particular role anymore. And it just becomes about getting people on the same page about what the mission and the vision is. And if you do that well, in theory, you've done a good job.
You've done a good job. Yeah. All right. What's number 3? Did you say 3?
What is the third thing? I think the third thing then is it's hard to define, but a lot of it kind of goes back to the first thing, which is setting the vision and mission. The third thing really is spending time with the team and just really, like, founders in particular, I think have this special ability to kind of drop in and provide clarity and remove roadblocks that is hard for anyone else to do, because you just have so much context around how the business works and who the customer is and how all the pieces fit together. And so I do a lot of just kind of dropping in and sharing stories and listening to what's going on and trying to understand what is it that's working, what is it that's not working, so that we can kind of continue to execute at a high level. It's a bit squishy and fuzzy, but for whatever reason, it works.
There was a few words that you said, and I get that would be hard to put words around. But when you were saying the third one, you are like the historian of the company, but also the future. Like, you know all the stories and what worked and what didn't work. Like, you might have tried to solve a problem 5 different ways. So you can tell somebody, okay, those 4 ways didn't work. Let me shortcut this for you.
Yeah.
And then you also see, because you have this bird's eye view, they may not even know this other department's trying to tap into solving the same problem. You're connecting dots. I totally get that. That actually sounds extremely fun. So
it is pretty fun. It's challenging too, because sometimes you're like, I have no idea how this is going to fit together, but somehow it's got to.
Yeah. Okay. So you said that I'm going to lean on my own experience, but I got into business in 2012. So similar time frame. And it feels like it was yesterday. And I don't have 200 employees. And I know what kind of personal growth I have gone through. Like, I feel like I'm not even the same person. So what is something that you have learned about yourself or developed in yourself to make you the leader you are today?
You know, I think I'm just better with people. I'm just better because at the end of the day, like, the business is a people business. We have 3 million users. We have 1,400 partners. We have 200 employees. And most of the things that I do today to be successful are getting people to buy into like this new way of thinking, the way that we think about the world and what we want to achieve. If I rewind the clock 7 years ago, I was kind of a quiet introvert. I'm still introverted and, certainly had a lot of opinions about things, but I didn't know. I was too brash and too bold in the way that I would present those things. I didn't know the first thing about what it took to really get people on the same page as me, to work alongside me. That was something that I had to just get better at as we've grown, is like how to get excited about bringing someone into the fold and see the value of working with other folks, which, in the early days, it's like, I can do this all on my own. I'll figure it out, right?
Right.
And now I know that that's not true. It takes a village to really make things work well.
Yes, it does. And so I would ask, what's next for Zapier? What are you guys excited about right now?
I think for us, our mission, again, help everybody be more productive at work. And so I think what that boils down to from a product perspective is how can we do a better job of educating people about the types of ways they can use the product? There's 1,400 different apps on this service. There's so many different ways that you can use it. So what does that mean for you and your role? Because you don't care about 1,400 ways to use it. You care about a very few reasons where you're like, this really makes my day. This is how it becomes my extra little employee.
Yeah.
So we need to help people find those use cases that match them. And so we're working a lot on recommendations and personalization to really help find the use cases that fit every individual, so that when they sign up, it's less of, oh my God, there's so many things here, to more of like, oh my goodness, that's exactly what I was looking for. So we're spending a lot of time trying to just simplify that onboarding experience so it connects with people from the get-go.
That's great. So I actually peruse Zapier every once in a while. I'm like, there's so many programs I don't know. That looks cool. And then you go down this rabbit hole and you're like, what does that program do, right?
Yep.
So I have an idea for you, Wade. Maybe you guys are already on it. But as you were just speaking, I feel like if I went to your website and I could enter in or check boxes of all the programs I use, right? Like go down my credit card statement of subscriptions and check them off. And then it would spit out recommendations of things that people have already created. Because I'm not creative to sit there and be like, oh, I use QuickBooks and I use Zoom and I use this and that. Like maybe somebody else already created this really badass app, right?
Yeah.
And then what the input from me is like, this is everything I already use.
Yep. So I've got exciting news. We have a version of that that's live already. Yep.
Okay. So I need to know about that. That is exactly what I was thinking in my head would be so cool.
I think we can make what we have even better though. So I think you can input those things and we can just get better at helping you find those things, because you use it all the time and you didn't know. So like, we got to do a better job.
So what I had used was you go and put 2 in, right? And it gives recommendations, but I want to put like all 6 in.
Yeah.
And because if I put 2 in, that means I'm already thinking I know what I want, but oftentimes you don't know what you want. And so this would be just more ways.
It's everything I use in my business.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, okay, this is great. Is there anything you would like to share with us about the adventures of being a CEO that you enjoy sharing with other business owners?
I think, since we're talking about productivity so much, the thing that I think I've learned along the way is there's 2 things. One is just do the thing. So many times we got caught up in the past debating every nuance of a particular decision, when in reality, we should have just done the thing and we would have been good. So I think that one is so critical. And then the second thing is success is often defined by the things you don't do. So be willing to say no to things that aren't critical to what you're working on, because when you say no, that allows you to say yes to the very important thing that's going to be the one that helps you achieve whatever it is you're trying to achieve. And I know when we were getting started, we chased so many different little shining objects because we thought, oh, maybe this would be the one. When in reality, I think if we put a critical eye on it, we knew like, hey, the heart of our business is really X. Let's stay focused on X and spend more time on that, instead of chasing like this random little partnership or this little discount deal thing that we could have done over here. Those things, I think, just often led us into short-term decisions.
Yes. I think that every entrepreneur has this issue. I actually spoke last night at an event, and afterwards the lady came up to me and she said, I'm in my first year of business. Like, what do you advise? I just feel like I'm trying everything.
And
I said, well, when you first start out, it's kind of like, sitting at the bar and ordering the sampler platter. Like you need to figure out what works. But at some point you have to decide like, what is your favorite and what are you doubling down on? Yeah. I think what happens is while it's kind of a rite of passage, is you need to figure out like what product or whatever works. Then it becomes habitual, and that's just the way you run your business. Yeah. And at some point you got to look around and be like, okay, I'm done trying to do all the things. I'm going to decide I'm doubling down, and then reevaluate and adjust on a regular basis.
Totally.
Yeah, that was great advice. Great advice. Wade, thank you so much for being here today. I will be definitely sharing out the links to Zapier and a little bit more information on how I use Zapier for our listeners. Thank you for being here, and I hope you have a productive day.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Amber.
All right. Bye-bye. Okay, wasn't that a great conversation with Wade? Thank you so much for joining us and listening in as I was able to dive deep with him and really ask him, well, how did it come about that you had 100% remote team? And what I loved is that they looked at something that maybe the industry or other entrepreneurs thought as a challenge, and they leaned into it and they found a way that works for them. And then they actually got to experience so many positive outcomes from going against the norm and trying something new. And I would invite you to ask yourself, well, where can you do that in your business? Where is it that you're looking at something that could look like a challenge or an obstacle? And if leaned into it, how could that give you a really, really positive return? And as mentioned in the interview, I am an actual user of Zapier, and I would highly recommend checking them out if you're looking to create automation or are currently frustrated with having to use multiple programs that don't talk to each other. And so now you have duplicated efforts and tasks, and you're putting in the same information in multiple places because each program uses it differently. Zapier will solve a lot of those problems. It is a pretty easy program to figure out, and I would definitely go recommend taking a look at that. I have loved having you listen to this episode of Productivity Straight Talk, and I want to thank you for being a loyal listener, and thank you for sharing the Productivity Straight Talk with others. I have seen a huge increase in listenership, and I am certain that is because you are taking the time to actually share these episodes with others, and I just want to give you a big thank you. Now, the time is your time right now to decide, based on today's interviews, what ahas or actionables came to mind that, if executed on, would have a big result in your business. I've loved having you listen to this episode, but I need to be straight with you. No change, no change. Without taking action, nothing will change for you or your business. So based on what you learned today, what are you going to take action on? Now, when I offer you up this challenge, this could be actually nothing that has anything to do with the episode. And I know that sounds really odd, but perhaps Zapier is not an option for you. But hearing Wade talk about remote work, maybe it will inspire you to take the next step in looking at virtual employees or contractors. Or perhaps maybe Zapier is not the option, but the idea of creating more automation in your business has been on the horizon or something you've been thinking about. And now is the time to take action on that. We all have so many things that we are thinking about, contemplating about, or on someday in wish lists. But when you're done listening to an episode of Productivity Straight Talk, I would love for you to decide what is it that you will take action on, big or small. Creating action, or taking action rather, on a consistent basis is like building that muscle of doing the things that will have the biggest impact on your business and life. I would love to hear how you're using automation in your business. And part 2, if you have remote employees and contractors, I would love to hear about your experiences and any best practices or any secrets that you can share with us. So go ahead and share that with us on the inside of Productivity Straight Talk community. If you're not already a Productivity Straight Talk insider, you can join us for free by going to productivitycommunity.com. Again, that's productivitycommunity.com. And for all you productivity insiders, I would love to chat with you on the inside of our private Facebook group. So we will be taking this conversation off the airways and on to our community. All right. I also have a special thank you going out to mega agent and author who recently left me a review on iTunes and said, achieve a higher level of success in business and life. Amber De La Garza is a true productivity specialist. Thank you so much, mega agent and author. So that's my straight talk for you today. And until next time, have a productive week. Before we close out, I just wanted to remind you one last time that if you're interested in joining my 2-part masterclass series, which I'm starting to teach next week, you need to go claim your spot over at theproductivityspecialist.com/dominate. 2 parts: dominate your calendar, conquer your email. And I look forward to seeing you in the masterclass.